When Zelensky arrives at the White House, he expects support, but turns into a trap. Trump gives an ultimatum, either peace on his terms or the destruction of a political career. Blackmail, manipulation, and deadly secret deals are used. But what if the real twist is waiting across the pond? An unexpected ally, a risky move, and a world that could change history. Who will emerge victorious? And at what cost? Watch until the end. The ending will shock you. Zelensky strode into the Oval Office, his back straight but aware of the weight of the shadow that loomed over the meeting. The room smelled of old leather chairs, coffee, and something he couldn't describe, a mixture of power and anticipation. Trump sat in his chair, unbuttoning his jacket. Behind him, Vice President J.D.Vance stood still as a statue, his expression cold. Well then, Trump stood up, not hiding his fatigue. Let's begin the look. Zelensky sat down opposite, trying not to show nervousness. Outside the window, the Washington sky was a gloomy gray fifth. I appreciate your support, Mr. President, Zelensky said. Trump leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Volodya, I have one question. Do you even want to end this war? The air in the office thickened. Zelensky froze for a second, but then held his gaze. Of course. That's why we're here. Trump chuckled, shook his head, and, as if speaking out loud, said, It seems to me that you like this war. The words sounded like a punch in the face. Zelensky blinked, but did not look away. This is offensive. Offensive. Trump raised his eyebrows. Offensive that America is tired of spending money on a war that never ends? My people probably don't want to pay for you anymore. This is not a war for money. Zelensky's voice became harsher. No. Trump turned to Vance. JD, how much have we invested so far? Vance took out his phone, scrolled through something, and answered coldly. $280 billion. Trump chuckled. Do you hear? $280 billion. Now tell me how this story ends. Zelensky leaned forward slightly. This will end in victory. The president said he was tired of hearing the same words. Yes? Then explain this to me. When are you going to start peaceful oceans? Here it is. Zelensky felt his muscles tense. This was the key moment. He knew this was where the conversation was headed. But he hadn't expected Trump to go so abruptly. We are ready to negotiate, he said cautiously. Trump chuckled. You're lying. Zelensky squeezed calculators. We won't tell. If Russia. This again, Trump interrupted. Again, if Russia. And I'm telling you, it's time to stop whining and come to an agreement. With whom? Zelensky raised his eyebrows. With the one who kills our people? Trump narrowed his eyes. Do you think your people don't talk? Silence hung in the air. You want money? Trump leaned forward again. Then you play by our rules. Zelensky stood up slowly. Ukraine does not bargain. The president smiled, the way people smile when they know for sure that they have won. Well, he said. We'll see what you say in a couple of weeks. Zelensky didn't answer. He turned and walked towards the exit, but had barely touched the door handle when he heard Vance's voice. Wait. He turned around. Vance threw the phone on the table. Before they left, they took a look. Zelensky looked at the screen. And a second later, he realized that his world was about to turn upside down. Zelensky stared at the screen of his phone. There was something there that he couldn't see in the post. What is it? His voice was cold, but a storm was already raging inside. Vance bowed his head. Data. Information. Things you wouldn't want to discuss at a press conference. Trump remained silent, watching their conversation, rocking back and forth in his chair as if it amused him. You have nothing to blackmail me with, Zelensky said. Vance looked up slowly. This is not blackmail. This is reality. Zelensky kept a low silence, holding back his irritation. If you have accusations, voice them out loud. Vance shook his head. We are not in court, Volodya. This is not the conversation that is being recorded. He looked at the phone again, then swiped his finger across the screen and turned it back towards him. It is enough to know that we have reason to believe that it is time for you to start talking about peace seriously. Trump finally spoke. Let me explain it more simply. You can continue your game, talk about principles, heroism, guarantees. We respect this, really, but you are losing support. Money is the real battlefield. Zelensky gritted his teeth. Are you saying that America will no longer provide for Ukraine? Trump steepled his fingers and tilted his head to the side. America does what's good for America. This isn't your war right now, my friend. Anger flashed through Zelensky, but he suppressed it. What if I refuse? Trump grinned. Then you should read the headlines very carefully tomorrow morning. The silence in the room stretched. Vance put his hands on his chest. You do understand that in the usual count you will have to sacrifice yourself to do this? Zelensky stood up. I have to go? He turned and headed towards the exit. Trump, a voice said. Zelensky froze. 24 hours, Trump said. Then we make the decisions. Zelensky declared silence. He didn't know what it was they were holding him back, but he knew one thing. The game was just beginning. Zelensky left the Oval Office, but it seemed as if he had left behind incredible power without ever leaving. He took a deep breath in the hallway, but even the air here felt weak. What exactly were they holding against him? What had Vance shown on the screen? At that moment, his advisor came over and leaned closer. They do it harshly, he said quietly. Zelensky turned. Find out what they are cooking. The substance advisor disappeared. Zelensky headed for the exit. He knew one thing. If he didn't seize the initiative now, it might be too late later. When he got into the car, the phone vibrated. Number unknown. He answered. You need to see this, said the voice at the other end. Who are you? Someone who doesn't want to be used. Check your email. Beeps. Zelensky opened his laptop and turned on the secure channel. The letter was already waiting. He clicked. The first thing he saw was a photo. Him. In a closed room. Talking to someone whose face was later unbearable. Under the photo was the text. What if the world found out who you're really making peace with? Zelensky felt a chill go down his spine. The phone vibrated again. This time it was Vance. He picked up the phone. Saw? Where did you get this? It doesn't matter. The question is, do you really want this to appear on the front pages? Zelensky gritted his teeth. This is manipulation. It's leverage, Vance replied calmly. And you know exactly how it works. Silence. What do you want? We want peace. But in our conditions. Zelensky closed his eyes. You have 24 hours, Volodya. And believe me, it's better to make the right choice. The connection was interrupted. Zelensky looked at the screen. And he realized they left him no choice. Either he would find a way to strike first, or he would lose. Zelensky sat in a dark hotel room, staring at his laptop screen. The photo in the letter stared back at him like an accusation. Who took this photo? Who leaked the information to Trump and Vance? There was no answer, but the fact was, they had dirt. And if he didn't do something right now, tomorrow morning the world would see headlines that would turn everything upside down. The phone vibrated again. This time the call was expected. Speak. Zelensky picked up the phone. On the other end was his intelligence contact. We have something. The voice was quiet but tense. You're the only one they're collecting dirt on. Zelensky straightened up. What do you have? We found the photos. They are not Americans. Pause. Then who? The answer hit like a shot. Moscow. Silence hung in the air. They leaked this to Trump? Zelensky asked. It looks like it. The Kremlin wants America to put pressure on you. They want that kind of treatment. But on their terms. Zelensky felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just a political move. This was a game in which the rules weren't dictated solely by Trump and Vance. Is there anything we can answer? The scout was silent. There is something. I need facts, Zelensky said harshly. We have information about the negotiations between Moscow and the Trump campaign. If this comes to light, it will change everything. Zelensky closed his eyes. It was a risk. If he struck first, he could win. But if he miscalculated, the consequences would be catastrophic. You have 2 hours, he said. Get it for me. The connection was interrupted. Zelensky looked out the window. Now the game has changed, and he was going to play by his own rules. Zelensky stood by the window, looking out at the lights of Washington at night. The room was silent, but inside him a storm was raging. He was waiting for the call, the one that decides everything. The phone rang. It rang instantly. We have evidence. The intelligence officer's voice rang out loudly. The negotiations between Trump's people and Moscow were conducted taking into account the past year. After the meetings, we found closed calls, even encrypted messages. Zelensky squeezed the phone. How ironclad is it? More than that. If this comes out, it will be a scandal. They didn't just want to stop supporting Ukraine, they played on Moscow's side. Pause. Is there anything that will tie Trump personally? The voice on the other end hesitated. Not yet, but there is Vance. He knew about these negotiations, perhaps even coordinated them. Zelensky closed his eyes. Vance, the man who stood next to Trump in the Oval Office. The man who looked at him with an icy smile as he slipped him dirt. He remembered their conversation. You can continue your game, but you are losing support. Now everything fell into place. We need to go to the press, he said. It's dangerous, the scout replied. They struck back. They have already struck. The scout fell silent and then said quietly, there is one more problem. What? We're not the only ones who know this. Zelensky tensed up. Who else? The Europeans. Paris and Berlin, of course. But they are silent. They do not want a conflict with Washington. Now it was even more complicated. If Europe knew and did nothing, it meant they were afraid. And fear meant the game was much bigger than he thought. The phone vibrated again. New call. Hold the line, he said to the scout and pressed the answer button. Mr. President, the voice was familiar. The President of France. Emmanuel, this is not the best time. Zelensky sat down at the table. I know. The voice was calm but tense. I'm calling to tell you. Be careful. Did you know? Pause. Let's not play naive. We're monitoring the repairs. And does nothing? We cannot allow this to destroy Europe. Zelensky gritted his teeth. Are you asking me to keep quiet? I suggest you be a strategist. If you strike first, make sure you can withstand a counterattack. The connection was interrupted. He ran his hand over his face. Now it was all up to him. There were two ways. 1. To have fun in a world scandal and risk losing your friends and allies. 2. Try to use this information in trading. But there was no time to think. The phone vibrated again. This time it was Vance. Zelensky smiled. He knew what he would say. And I knew that after this there would be no turning back. You thought for a long time, Volodya. Vance's voice was even, but with a barely noticeable twitch. So you have an answer? Zelensky leaned back in his chair, clutching his phone. He was calm. Almost. I have a counterproposal. There was a pause on the other end. I'm listening. We both know that compromat is a tool. If you wanted to intimidate me, you would have leaked this information already. But you called. That means you need something more. Vance chuckled. I need peace, Zelensky. And so do you. No, you want the peace that Fox News sells. The peace that leaves me a loser. You've already lost. You just don't realize it yet. Zelensky was silent. Have you seen the documents? What documents? Those that prove the connection of your people with Moscow. There was silence on the line for a second. You're bluffing. You are sure? Now the silence dragged on. I wonder how much this scandal costs. Zelensky spoke softly, but there was steel in every word. I can give it to the press. Or I'll give it to you. Vance sighed. What do you want? Zelensky knew this was the moment of truth. I want your administration to stay out of Ukraine's way. No ultimatums. No pressure. You're taking a step back. You demand too much. I suggest we improve it. You know that your boss won't be able to withstand such a scandal before the elections. If I leak this data, everything will end loudly. Vance didn't respond immediately. And what do you want in return? Time. Now the pause was on the other side. How many? A year. No pressure. This is impossible. Maybe. Because if not, tomorrow CNN will release a story that will bury you. Deep breath into the tube. You're taking a risk, Zelensky. I take risks every day. Silence. Vance finally said. We'll talk. But if you're playing with me, Volodya, you won't like it. The connection was interrupted. Zelensky put the phone away, but his fingers were tense. He is not guilty. But he did not lose. Now everything depended on the next step. Moscow. A closed room without windows. Dim lamplight. So you're finally ready to talk. Putin's voice was calm, but in this silence Zelensky heard steel. He sat opposite, his back straight, his gaze firm. I was always ready, he replied. But on my terms. Putin smiled slowly. You have no conditions, Vladimir Alexandrovich. Zelensky paused. Your people leaked the Americans' incriminating evidence. You wanted to force me to surrender, but you forgot one detail. Putin raised an eyebrow. Which one? Zelensky leaned closer. I'm still here. Putin's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Your calculation didn't work, Zelensky continues. Now the Americans know you were playing. And they don't like it. Putin bowed his head slightly. Are you sure they won't abandon you? Zelensky chuckled. Maybe. But if they decide they are being manipulated, they will abandon you too. There was silence. Have you come here with a proposal? Putin finally asked. I came here to repeat that the game is not over yet. Putin did not move. Do you have a plan? I have a move that won't suit you. Putin's eyes narrowed. Are you blackmailing me? I'm showing you that I have an alternative. Putin tapped his finger on the table. A year ago, you would not have sat at this table. Zelensky smiled. A year ago, you wouldn't have called me either. Pause. You know that this doesn't change anything? It does. Your mistake is that you decided that I have no choice. Putin looked at him long and carefully. We'll see, Vladimir Alexandrovich. Zelensky stood up. I think we both know that I've already made my choice. He turned around and passed out. Putin watched it, and at first he was silent for a long time. Washington, White House, Oval Office. Trump sat in his chair, leaning back and turning the controls. In front of him was a TV screen, frozen in a frame of Zelensky in front of the press. He's going to make a statement, Vance said, standing by the window. Trump chuckled. I wonder what song he'll sing this time. Vance looked at him silently. He could have leaked our microphone to Moscow, but he didn't do it. Trump narrowed his eyes. And what does this mean? It means that he is waiting. He does not want war with us, or with Europe. He wants room to maneuver. Trump chuckled. Well, let's see what he surprises us with. Zelensky walked up to the podium, his bag blinded by cameras, but he didn't even blink. Thank you for coming. I want to make a statement, he began. Vance and Trump met behind the screen. The last few weeks have not been easy, Zelensky continues. We have heard a lot of words about peace. We have heard pressure, pressure, pressure. The cameras captured his gaze. But now I will say the main thing. Ukraine will not trade its independence. Vance tensed. Further, we are opening the regime, but only on conditions that ensure the security and sovereignty of our country. Trump shook his head. He's bluffing. But Zelensky is not finished yet. I also want to say that we have information about negotiations that were conducted behind our backs. We will not publish it. For now. The president stopped twisting the pen. Crap. Zelensky paused. Ukraine does not give in. We do not give in to blackmail. Vance cursed under his breath. Trump chuckled. What a cunning bastard. Zelensky walked away from the podium. And the world realized. This game is not over yet. He could have broken. He could have gone further. But he took the risk. With the doors of the White House closed, under pressure from Moscow and Washington, Zelensky made a move no one expected. He did not give in. He did not give in to blackmail. He left his hand in the air, and now the world holds its breath. What happens next? There is no answer. Only one thing is clear. This game is not over yet. If you want to know how it all ends, subscribe, like, and click the bell. The most interesting part is just beginning.